Good afternoon. This is our contact webinar on positive behaviour support, which is understanding and managing behavioural needs. This is a contact webinar. If there's a technical hitch, please do bear with us. We have a moderator with us today, Helen, who will help us with any technical hitches that we have, so you can always pop those in your question box. And you should be able to see this introduction slide now that we've started. Just to let you know, the webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to access anything via YouTube, any questions or anything that you'd like to rethink about at a later point. As there are so many attendees, you'll all remain muted throughout the presentation, so the only voices that you'll hear is myself and my co-presenter. However, you can ask any questions via the question mark button. I'm not really sure where that is for you. So, if it's okay, we'll introduce ourselves now.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Dionne and I'm an occupational therapist and I work for Cumbria, Northumberland, Tyne and Wear NHS Foundation Trust, and I work with children and young people with diagnoses of learning disabilities and or autism who display behaviour that may be complex and challenging. And I'm really pleased to be here today and be co-presenting with Steph.
Hi, my name's Steph Carr. I'm a speech and language therapist and I specialise in working using a methodology called Positive Behaviour Support, which we're here to think about today. And just like Dionne, I work with young people aged 5 to 18 who have learning disabilities and or autism, who are having some difficulties with their behaviour. And I work in the North East too with TSS and Weir Valleys Community Foundation Trust. So it's an absolute delight to be with you today. Now, positive behaviour support is the thing that Dionne and I like to speak out about more than anything else, I think, because it's a slightly new way of thinking about behaviour. It's a framework and a methodology that helps us understand about the big why about behaviour, about why sometimes tricky behaviour happens and why sometimes tricky behaviour doesn't happen. It helps us understand that difficult or challenging or wobbly behaviour is often a mismatch between skills and needs for a young person. I often think that it must be hard to have tricky behaviour, or it must be hard to have challenging behaviour. And so recognising that if our little ones had a different way to communicate a need or a different way to express themselves, then they would probably choose that. PBS teaches us that all behaviour happens for a reason. And if we work really, really hard, we can start to understand together what that reason might be. I'll give you some ideas on the next slide. And an important thing about PBS is it's kind. Positive behaviour support is kind. It knows that people don't learn well from mistakes, but do learn new skills and ways to communicate over time. And I think that's really, really important. So that's a little bit about kind of what positive behaviour support is. It helps us use a framework about that big why, and that's sometimes called a term contingency, but actually that's a little bit of a fancy reason to say there are 4 reasons why most people do anything. Now, I think that going back a second, have you ever thought to yourself, I don't know why somebody did that, or I don't know, that came out of the blue? I hear that a lot. I hear it came out of the blue a lot, or yeah, there was no it came out of nowhere. But actually, if you think about your own behaviour, or you think about all the things that you do, like sometimes I know that I'll come in from work, I'll sit next to my husband on the couch and I'll do a really big sigh. And then if he doesn't do anything, I might do it again. That's not a sigh, that's more like a vomiting noise, isn't it? But kind of, and I'll keep on sighing or tutting or flopping about until he says, "Oh, you look like you've had a bad day. Would you like a cup of tea?" And I am absolutely using my behaviour to get something around and something for myself. So this is a really simplistic way to think about this. But we think that most people engage in difficult or sometimes good behaviour for the following four reasons. We use our behaviour to gain attention, both from others and at times from others face to face or others over the internet. Maybe those others are people, maybe those others are a favourite pet, maybe that will be immediate attention, maybe that will be delayed attention. But if you think about the last time that you took a phone call, and I wonder whether this happens in your house, Dionne. Last time you took a phone call, did your little ones sit lovely and quiet while you took the phone call, or all of a sudden did they become louder than ever?
Absolutely not. And I think, Steph, on Monday you had a really good example of my little one deciding to sing as loud as she could when we were trying to have a bit of a Teams meeting.
Absolutely, and that's because sometimes our little ones know that if the telephone goes, or if somebody else walks into the room, or if you look like you might be talking to another adult, or you might look like that you might be leaving, that the amount of attention available to them might be just about to decrease. And so gaining attention can be a really, really powerful way or powerful motivator for children to get and to use their behaviour. So that's the first reason why we think that young people use behaviour to make their needs known. The next reason is around escape. Have you ever thought that you didn't want to do anything? Sometimes, especially on a Friday afternoon, funnily enough, I'm a little bit sick of doing my paperwork in the office, and I suddenly become the most helpful person that's ever been. And I will use all of my exciting skills to do things like I might ask a colleague if they need some help. I might ask the colleague what they're doing this weekend. I might decide to go and make a round of tea for the office. Pre-COVID, we're not doing rounds of tea for the office anymore because we'd have to touch each other's stuff. So I use all of my good behaviour to escape from that thing that I don't want to do, which is my paperwork. But similarly, it might be that you ask your little one to give you some help doing the dishwasher, and all of a sudden they decide that they need to go to the bathroom. It might be that an environment that they're in becomes too loud or too confusing or not motivating enough, and they might use their behaviour to try and leave that situation. The one that I classically think then is about escaping from toddlers escaping from the supermarket. They've been in the supermarket too long and they start to escalate the behaviour. They start to get fidgety, they start to get fiddly, and kind of mum or dad or grandma and granddad that's with them will hurry up the shopping because they can see the little one starting to get a bit niggly. Escape can be from a demand, it can be from a situation or an activity, but it also can be a thought or feeling. If you feel sometimes tricky about yourself, or if you've got an unwelcome feeling or an intrusive feeling, then you might use your behaviour to kind of escape from that feeling. A good example is our little ones that are having difficult times at school that might escalate the behaviour before they even go to school to try and escape from the potential of that feeling difficult or feeling bad that school might bring them. So we've got attention and escape so far. And then we've got tangible gain. Tangible gain is a really fancy way just to say stuff. People use their behaviour to get stuff. Now, as much as I absolutely love coming to work, I have the best job in the world, I also come to work to get paid because I want to get stuff. That might be something that I can hold in my hand, like a biscuit or a chocolate bar or a new pair of sunglasses. But it might be a holiday. It might be what else do people want in the world, Dionne? I'm struggling.
Makeup. I come to work to buy makeup.
Yes, me too. Absolutely. But that might be something. So we're all trying to use our behaviour to get things. And those are sometimes really easy things to understand. So there might be a little person that wants a biscuit before they eat their tea. It might be a little person who wants a specific toy or a magazine or a sweet or something like that. But it also could be something much less obvious. Like it might be a person that wants a specific piece of paper or a specific colour cup. So people might be using their behaviour for for items that we would think is very high value, or they might be using their behaviour to get things that are just important to them. I think tangible gains are very important one to think about, especially for younger children and for children going through adolescence, because can you remember when you were at school and sometimes having the right trainers was the most important thing in the world, because it wasn't about how they looked or how they felt. It was about being in the crew with the right trainers, because that might make you a little bit more popular. So tangible gain can be very closely linked to self-esteem too. And then the fourth reason that we think that anybody does anything is because it meets an internal sensory need. Sometimes that can be explained by people rocking or jumping or flapping or humming, but that can be just as easy explained as me wanting to go in the bath at the end of the day to get a pleasurable feeling. So why have I told you about that? PBS is based on understanding some of these reasons why children and adults engage in difficult behaviour, and understanding this big why, presenting your idea about, is it about attention, is it about escape, is it about gaining something, or is it about a sensory need? It can truly help you as a family develop the right kind of strategy, because you can imagine if a young person is using their behaviour to gain some attention, ignoring them's not going to go well, because actually they're going to escalate their behaviour to try and get your attention, which they will achieve at some point. So understanding that why is really important when we're thinking about problem solving and designing strategies for your family. And John's going to go on in the next couple of slides, is going to talk about how we can work out our big why.
So as Steph says, I'm going to think about how we work out our big why. And I like to think about some of the work that myself and Steph and the teams that we work with, we're a bit like investigators. We want to find out that why. And I definitely think if I wasn't an OT working in PBS, I might have been in the police. Investigating, finding out. I think that's a lot of what we do. So when we think about behaviour, we need to consider the setting events or the things that might have happened prior to things happening, prior to the incident. And sometimes to think about this, we think about a demand and capacity model. So it's about thinking about all the things that might contribute to filling our bucket. Throughout the days we go through our day, our buckets get full of lots of different things. So I'll just give a really very basic example is, for some of the young people that I work with, noise is really aversive and can be really difficult for them to manage. And if we think about, as we go through our day, all the different noises that we deal with, so we have things like, at the moment, it's quite like morning, so they may be woke up by birds chirping. So I know the birds wake me up quite a bit. And then on a morning, in my house, it's crazy. It's quite chaotic and it's quite noisy. So there's extra noises, there's people talking, there's cutlery crashing. And then our young people go into a school environment. So throughout the day, their bucket's getting filled up with this noise. And our young people might have strategies to deal with that, so some capacity to deal with that. So they might generally be able to deal with a little bit of that. And then they might have other strategies that they use, such as ear defenders, music, humming, things that they can manage. So essentially what we're saying is that if your bucket gets too full and you don't have the strategies to come out, then you might see a behaviour occur. And so it's thinking about the setting event. So do you want to go on the next slide, Steph?
I do. There we go.
So setting events essentially help us work out if a young person is calm or whether they have limited capacity to cope. So if you're thinking about a setting event, is the young person in the classroom, do they have access to their ear defenders? Are they in part of the classroom where it's quiet? If we're thinking about noise, then are they able to cope with the demand that we're about to put on that young person? Or, you know, have that young person come into the classroom? Is there somebody else in the classroom making a lot of noise? Have we got builders next door who are, you know, drilling at the walls? So thinking about actually what that setting event is, whether that young person in particular has the capacity to cope. You know, has that young person had enough sleep? Have they had a tricky night? And it can help us to plan what activities and strategies we can use to help them empty the bucket. So, you know, if we know that we've got builders next door and they're going to be there all day, do we actually need to think about that young person not going to that classroom? Does that young person need to be taught somewhere else? Does that young person need to have some music on? Do they need their ear defenders? So it helps us think of ways that they can empty their bucket. And it helps us to think of, teach us a way of understanding what fills a person's bucket. So it helps us investigate what are the reasons why, and also lets us think about what causes that. And a way that we can investigate what those setting events are is using ABC charts. So when there's an incident of behaviour that challenges, it's important that we consider the behaviour and the circumstances around it and make sure that it's clearly and accurately recorded so that we can begin to understand and to develop an overview of what's actually going on for that young person. And the reason for this is that it's only through good, clear recordings that behaviour can be understood and can be helped. So clear and accurate recordings consist of 3 parts. So obviously we want to record the behaviour itself. So we want to think what that actually looked like. So we get a good description of what the tricky behaviours are for each individual. And we want to think about what happened immediately before the behaviour, which we often call the antecedent. And we maybe want to know what happened immediately after that, so the consequence. And this is known as an ABC chart. If we go and I've got an example of an ABC chart. As I said, A is for antecedents, which are things that occur before the behaviour. So the antecedents include where, so things about what was happening, and who the behaviour occurred with. Does the behaviour occur with a certain person all the time? Does it occur with different people? Does it occur in the city? You know, is the behaviour happening at PE every Thursday? So thinking about where and with whom the behaviour occurs. And there are different types of antecedents. So some antecedents act as triggers, and these are the actual event that resulted in the behaviour occurring. And other antecedents don't necessarily act as triggers, but their presence or absence makes it more likely that a behaviour may occur. And these are often what we call setting events. So when I talked about antecedents and setting events, so the absence of ear defenders in a noisy room would be a setting event. So things in other setting events might be the environment being too hot or being too cold. As we said, noise, changes in routine can often result as a setting event, as well as personal vulnerabilities such as poor mental health, epilepsy, communication difficulties.
And it might be as simple as being tired or being hungry as well. You know, kind of those are things that will fill your bucket and make a trigger more likely to result in a behaviour than it might do on another day. I think there are some days when I get out of bed and I think I can conquer the world because basically I've had a good night's sleep, I've had a good breakfast, and I've got no worries in my bucket. But there are some days where I get out of bed and I want to crawl back under it. And that's probably because my bucket's quite full. I'm quite full of setting events, so I might be worried about work, or I might have slept really badly, or kind of stuff that you don't really realise that's impacting. Like you might be worried about COVID or something like that. And so we get those setting events, which are those delayed bucket filling things, and then we get those direct triggers that Dionne's talking about too.
And I think the other thing to think about is a setting event for me that I think often gets overlooked, sometimes can be pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in young people who are less able to communicate, pain often can be majorly overlooked. So something as simple as having, we know ourselves having toothache, but can you imagine having toothache but not being able to actually communicate that you've got pain in your tooth? Or the fact that you haven't actually been to the toilet to pass the bowel movement, so constipation's another big one. So just thinking about things that might be impacting on a young person. So as we say behaviour, so what we would really say about behaviours that we'd really want to describe exactly what the young person did, what they shouted, what exactly did they say, how long did the behaviour last, how many times did it occur, did it happen once or did it happen a number of times, and what was the impact of that behaviour? Was there any damage? Was there any injury caused? So really we would like a very, very clear understanding of what the behaviour is. And then the final thing we want to think about is consequence. And this describes what happens after the behaviour or as a result of the behaviour for the person. And so we might think about, how did other people respond? What was the young person's response? What happened to the behaviour? Did it continue? Did it stop? Did it get, did it increase? Did you see an increase in the behaviour? And how was it managed? So really we want consequence. So ABCs are helpful in understanding the reason why someone may use challenging behaviour, but it's also useful to think about a person's motivation.
And if you
sorry.
You go, John.
So for me, motivation, I think for lots of the young people that we work with, is that their motivation can change from day to day. So you can do one activity one day and it's perfectly fine, and then the next day it's really, really different. And so it's thinking about that, Steph's talked about it a little bit, that a person's motivation changes throughout the day, and it all is based on the value that that young person may place on something. So a lovely example I can give is chocolate. I really, really, really love chocolate. But some days I can walk past a vending machine and think, oh, I don't really fancy a bar of chocolate from the vending machine. I can walk past it and I'm not motivated to go and buy one because I'm not hungry, or it's 9 o'clock in the morning and I've just had breakfast, or it's a really hot day and I don't fancy chocolate. But other days I might have had I've been to a really long meeting that's been talking about something that hasn't really interested me, and I'm feeling a bit meh, and I might think actually I'm going to buy a bar of chocolate. So those setting events that Steph were talking about can also be described a little bit as motivation. So I'm really motivated to buy that bar of chocolate because I've had a really rubbish meeting and I've got to go to another meeting and I've not seen any young people and I just want something to pick us up. And also, and that past experience, your learning history contributes to that. So I've had chocolate in the past and I know that it makes me feel happy and it picks me up. So I'm going to be motivated to go and get that chocolate. And our young people are like that sometimes. Sometimes, they've had that past experience of using a behaviour and they've had the desired response from it. So it makes sense that they go back to something, whether it be positive or negative, because they've gotten the desired response that they want. And so, collecting the data in terms of your ABC charts is really important, because it lets you start to look at everything that's happening and to develop a picture.
It helps you start to answer that why.
It does.
Because what you're looking at sometimes is you're looking at a difference in what happened before and what happened afterwards. You're looking at kind of, and sometimes you're looking about why it didn't happen too. Like kind of say, oh, this is a strange example. Say you've had a big incident when you asked your little one. I'm very dishwasher focused today. I don't know why I'm dishwasher focused. I think it's because I need to do
Your
it.
dishwasher needs emptied.
No, it's not being emptied. I need to go and do it. I need to go and fill it. So I think that so you imagine this scenario and you've got your two children and you ask Bob to do dishwasher. Bob screams and runs away into the living room, and you kind of think, what was that all about? You think, was it about escape? Did they not want to do the dishwasher? That's what it sounds like, isn't it? But actually, next time you ask Bob to do the dishwasher and maybe your other little boy or girl's not there, actually it all goes fine. And you think, well, what happened that time? Why didn't it happen? And you think, well, actually, maybe it's not about escape. Maybe it's not avoiding doing dishwasher. Maybe it's about attention, that actually what they wanted is they wanted what they needed, sorry, not what they wanted, what they needed at that time was some one-to-one attention, and they were getting two-to-one attention with their siblings. So they've screamed and run in the living room, and I followed them and they got the attention that they needed. So it is about that detective work, because the strategy that you'd put in place for the escape might be about a take a break card. It might be about putting some extra help in place. It might be about putting some extra motivation in place. Or the strategy for attention, again, might be doing it with somebody so that you get to take turns and you get to kind of fill them up with attention. It might be about getting your little boy or girl, other little boy or girl, to do a job while you spend some time with your other little one. So it really, really is key. ABCs are key in working out our big why, so we can work out the big what to do afterwards.
So I tend to think,
right?
I think that's about right. So I tend to think about it. So understanding antecedents is really helpful, because it helps us predict when and with whom the behaviour may happen. And it helps us think about what those immediate triggers are, what's going to trigger that behaviour. So it's really helpful in us beginning to be able to predict our young people. Isn't that great that actually I've started to build this picture up that I can predict that might happen at that point? Understand the consequences is helping us to think about what's maintaining and why this young person keeps using this behaviour over and over again. And understand the person's motivation helps us think about why things happen at a certain time and not at others. And I think for lots of families, lots of education, that's one of the biggest things I have. But he did it yesterday. He did it yesterday with no problem. And then it was really difficult today. So I think that's given us that real foundation to start to be able to really begin to work with our young people.
Absolutely.
Oh, still with me. So once we've begun to understand the why, what we might want to do is think about teaching new skills. And why might we want to teach new skills? Well, clearly we probably want to teach our young people that scribbling all over our lovely bathroom wallpaper maybe isn't the best thing to do, when we maybe want to teach them that scribbling on some actual paper would be much better. But for me, positive behaviour support is about teaching and guiding young people to be successful. What does anybody want for a young person is to live a really successful, fulfilling and rewarding quality of life. And for me, that's what PBS is about. It's about improving a young person's quality of life. And the most important long-term thing that we can do for young people is to give them a way to meet their own needs. So supporting a new person to develop a new skill can give them, and you can tell them no to here, gives them greater independence. it gives our young people choice and control, and provide them with further opportunities to try new things and to be an active citizen. And for me, as an OT, I feel that our young people who I work with learning disabilities and autism, that's the one thing that I want the message that I really want to give is that they can have really fulfilling and rewarding lives and have real choice and control and feel part of the community. So teaching new skills is really important to our children and young people.
Absolutely. Looking at, I put that graphic on there earlier on, so it's probably a bit of a surprise to Dionne. But can you see there's like another little hand in the corner? I'm not convinced that little man's the scribbler. I'm sure that little hand in the corner might be the scribbler. And so if it's about that little hand in the corner learning, it's not appropriate to draw on your brother, because there's much more fun things to do with your brother than draw on them.
I think I would have been less concerned about the brother, more I can wash him. I'm not sure I can wash those walls. So thinking about the type of skills we may want to teach. So we might want to teach some general skills. We might want to teach a young person how some independent living skills, so getting ourselves dressed. We may want to teach how to use a DVD, how to make a sandwich. I've spent many a year in the kitchen working with young people and adults, teaching them some really important independent living skills, and it goes a long way. And I would say some of the young people I've worked with doing positive behaviour support, people maybe wouldn't have thought that I'd be there teaching that young person how to make a sandwich, but I have, because it's been really important to that person to be able to have those skills and to live independently. And sometimes when I've worked with adults who lived in independent supported living, sometimes some of the function is that they wanted to be more independent, they wanted to do things. So you may want to teach more general skills. What we might want to do is teach a functionally equivalent replacement behaviour. So that sounds really rather fancy, but it might be, as Steph added in the slide, being a high five rather than a hit out for attention. It may be that we use a card to seek attention. So thinking about a replacement skill of a behaviour. And importantly, we want to teach coping and tolerance and learning to calm ourselves. So they are some of the types of skills that we may want to teach.
Absolutely. I think one of my favourite pieces of work I've ever done with a young person was introducing something really simple like a take a break card, because I think that is so effective in that really fancy technical term of the functionally equivalent replacement behaviour. Something as simple as a take a break card, I need 5 minutes to chill, kind of something for to teach your little one that actually is really, really powerful, because we all need 5 minutes sometimes. And it can save so much. It can save so many big responses to behaviour, kind of something so tiny.
Yes.
So, next slide.
So we might want to think about teaching new skills. How do we teach new skills? Well, we could use a fancy term called task analysis. And OTs use this word all the time. It's a very bread and butter of what we are taught right from the very beginning, is thinking about how to take a big task and then break it down into component parts. So OTs are really good at this, and I think we can break making a cup of tea down to about 600 different component parts, which is ridiculous. But we might want to decide the skill that you want to teach, and you might want to break it down into teachable units and define the steps or components very clearly. So maybe the skill that you want to teach is getting dressed. So what you might want to do is to break that skill right the way down, and we might use something like back chaining. So we might think that we want our young person to have success when teaching that skill. So we might do something like that. We're going to teach the skill in a very small part, and the last object to be put on may be a t-shirt, and that might be what we focus on, so that we might support with the whole task until you get to the t-shirt, and then they've got success because they've put that t-shirt on. But what we want to do is just to define the steps or the component of the task very clearly, because I think sometimes we underestimate the demands on each individual task. So having an understand of the activity that you're wanting to teach and then breaking it down. We might want to decide where, when and with whom the skill is needed. So is it a skill that they need to do in public, such as shopping? Is it something to do with meal times, such as setting the table? Is it something they only need to do when they're with grandparents, something they only need to do with parents? So deciding when and with whom the skill is needed is really important. We might want to arrange the environment to prompt the use of skill and provide reminders, or rely on natural cues wherever possible. So I've got a really nice example of this. Is I've got a little girl who never ever ever remembers to change her reading book, and this went on for quite some time. And it didn't matter how many verbal cues I give her going into school on the day that she needed to change it. It didn't happen. I couldn't change the school environment because no matter how much I talked to the teacher about it, we couldn't change it. So actually, what we did was I used her backpack, and I just put a little picture of her reading book in her backpack and just pinned it on the inside. So when she opened that backpack, when she went into school to get a water bottle out, if it was book change day, there was just a little cue of a picture of a book on the inside of a backpack, which meant that she could be successful in that task of changing her book, because she'd had that little environmental cue. So she wasn't relying on the teacher saying that to her, because that made her a little bit different to some of the children in her who were remembering to do it week in, week out, and I wasn't relying on the teacher, and it was just a little change to her backpack, and it gave her that cue that she needed to do it. So maybe think about the environment to prompt the use of the skill. So, if we're wanting to teach a cooking skill, we're not going to teach that cooking skill in the lounge, we're going to teach it in the kitchen. So think about your environment and thinking on the natural cues that you could use where possible. So if you are wanting to teach a skill on maybe washing a dish, then I wouldn't necessarily set that task up to be done. I'd do it at a natural time. So after a person's maybe had a cup of tea, you could help your child become successful in performing the skill by using prompts and examples. So you might want to model that example to you first. So I know if I'm doing things, I may model it. I may do the same task alongside a young person. For some young people, I might use gestures. I might use visual cues. You may use sequencing cards. And for some young people, I may actually use physical gestures or hand over hand, where I've really supported a young person to learn that skill. So think about how you can help that young person be successful, because actually what you want is success. You might want to use praise and reward for the skill progression in the right direction. So don't keep all your praise and reward till that person can completely do that task. You want to give that praise and reward quite freely, and when they've completed components of the task, so that they begin to feel success. And what we call fading out is that we would want to gradually reduce the assistance of feedback or praise that we give, so that the reward is being able to do that skill by itself.
Yeah, because if you're going to make a sandwich, your reward's always going to be eating the sandwich at the end, isn't it? Because that's the best reward.
Yeah, and that's it. So, but you might be given a lot of assistance or a lot of feedback as a person is learning to develop making the sandwich. But equally, what you want is that sandwich to become the reward. Yeah. So, and it's now really to think about when to teach a new skill. So I've put this behaviour escalation curve on, and I know that Steph's going to talk about it a little bit further on. But really, what this really just says is, you want to teach a new skill when a young person is calm and focused and able to attend. So you want to do their new skill in the green part of the escalation curve, but it's when the environment that can meet their needs. So, you know, if is that environment quiet, is that the right environment for that young person to be learning that skill in? You want to think about that young person's style, their interpersonal style, and how you're going to work with that, their communication, and how you're going to communicate with that young person. And you want that's the best place, that is the best place to be teaching skills. Really, once we're getting into the amber, the red or the blue, wouldn't be the right time to be teaching skills. We kind of want them to be when we're in that really primary, that attention, that focus skills. So if we're teaching somebody to wait, we wouldn't try to teach that new skill of waiting when they were, you know, in that reactive stage where waiting probably wouldn't be tolerated. We want to do it where we know that they're going to have the best chance of tolerating a wait.
Absolutely. One of the first things, I used to work for a team that was called the Challenging Behaviour Team, which is a really tricky term to use. But one of the first things I learned when I worked for that team is one of the practitioners that have been there a longer time said to us, "You don't teach a drowning man to swim, Stephanie." And I thought, what on earth do they mean? But it's exactly what Dionne's just talked about there, is you don't wait until somebody's really angry and really struggling or failing or just absolutely overwhelmed to teach them how to calm down. You've got to teach them it when they're already calm. You don't wait until they can't change the DVD to teach them how to use a DVD player. You don't teach a drowned man to swim. You just save them. You teach them how to swim on a different day. It was one of the best lessons I've ever learned.
Yeah, and that's where I think that's really important about teaching the skill when it's the right time to teach the skill, because all the skills in the world, all the modelling, all the coaching, all the back chaining, all the fading out, all those lovely approaches to teaching skills won't work if that young person is in that really reactive phase. It needs to be when somebody's calm and alert. And I know for me, I'm probably on a Friday afternoon at 4:30, 5 o'clock, after a busy week at work, I'm not going to learn anything new then. Monday morning, when I've had a full weekend of rest, then somebody could maybe come and teach me something and I may take it on board a lot better.
Absolutely. Now, John and I are moving out of kind of almost our proactive and introduction to thinking about the big why, thinking about what to do about the big why, into thinking a little bit about what to do when it all goes wrong. And I'm sorry that we're squidging this in at the end, because actually we think sometimes people like Dionne and I think that working out the big why and working out what to do about the big why is the most important thing to do. But we know that these things are important in terms of what we would call reactive strategies and what to do when it all goes wrong. Right.
And it will go wrong times, that's the thing. Sometimes things just go wrong.
Absolutely. Sometimes things just go wrong. Now, you hope you can see a little graph in front of you. If I was doing this face to face, I'd be pointing all over the graph. But what I want you to imagine is Dionne's bucket at the just before the green bit of the graph, and that bucket for that person's got full. So kind of it's full of noise, or it's full of hay fever, or it's full of a combination of sleep and hunger and dental pain, and it's full. So someone's almost had enough, for want of a better way to put it. Their bucket is full. I say that a lot in the office. I go, my bucket's full, and someone will go and make me a cup of tea to try and empty my bucket. We say it a lot in our intensive positive behaviour support service. So your bucket's full, and the next thing that happens is going to start and trigger you. So I'm going to talk about me, which I know is a big surprise. So I get up one morning, I'm a little bit stressed, I'm a little bit tired, and I come down the stairs and I open the fridge and my husband's used all the milk. And I go, oh. And I have a tiny change in my behaviour. You can probably hear me sigh. You could probably see me roll my eyes a little bit. But actually, nothing's happening in terms of my internal response. So I'm not kind of having an emotional response to that or a big emotional response to that. But I move a little way from my baseline, which is my normal presentation. Only if you know me very, very well will you understand that I'm starting to get irritated. But you can see, well, sorry, you can't see because I haven't told you yet. But that green line goes up very slowly, doesn't it? So actually, I've only gone a little bit up the green line. I'm much closer to the baseline than I am to the crisis phase. And so if somebody recognises that I'm a little bit irritated, if somebody solved my problem or told me to go to the shops because I don't have the greatest of problem solving skills first thing in the morning, I'd be able to recover it, no problem. But then I go out of the house. I haven't had my cup of tea. My cup of tea is really important to us. I'm also a little bit annoyed with my husband for using all of the milk. And I get in my car and I turn the key and the petrol light comes on and I go, oh. And you can see my escalation. I'm starting to move through my escalation. And I might be moving out of my trigger phase, out of the green phase, into the orange, the escalation phase now. Because I've had another event happen very quickly and I've not worked on anything to calm myself down. And you'll see some more observable signs of me getting annoyed. If this was your child, you might be thinking, what could I do to distract them? What could I do to divert them? How can I help them through this problem? And those are the things that would work for me. If I got in the car and I turned my petrol light on and then I immediately started to put some 80s power ballads on, I might return to baseline because that's one of the ways I calm, which I know is very strange. But actually, I've turned my petrol light on, I've had no cup of tea, I've turned my petrol light on, I've turned my car on, the petrol lights come on, and then I drive to the garage and there's a massive queue, and I think, oh, what am I going to do? And I think, oh, I'm going to be late for my first appointment. I hate being late. And so I ring my secretary and I go, oh, it's just Steph. I'm on my hands free. I don't know why I'm showing you my telephone, but you know I am. It's just Steph. Can you ring my first appointment and let them know I'm going to be a little bit late? And my secretary goes, well, if you're ringing me, why can't you ring them yourselves? And I move straight through the rest of my escalation phase into my crisis phase. And I put the phone down first because if I don't put the phone down first, that person might hear me swearing and I might lose my job. And I'm in crisis phase. Now, crisis phase, it's a fight, flight, or freeze response. Young people that are freezing or running are just as much as in crisis as young people that are using self-injury or physical aggression to kind of respond to the crisis. At this time, a hormone called adrenaline floods your system, and that makes you less able to listen. It makes you less able to communicate. It makes you less able to problem solve and make a good choice. So you're in this middle of the crisis, and your crisis behaviours come out. Now, adrenaline's a really powerful hormone. It's an evolutionary response to trying to make you safe. And so it diverts blood away from your big organs like your stomach and your gut into your legs and arms because it wants you to be able to run, it wants you to be able to fight it. It wants you to be able to find safety. But that might mean that you feel a little bit sick. It might mean that you feel like the world suddenly changed. So for our young people with autism, it can almost feel like its own transition as well. So it can push somebody further into crisis because these internal feelings are so hard. But that adrenaline is the important thing to talk about because it makes it less easy to make a good choice. It makes it really hard to make a good choice. And it makes it much easier to find your calm too. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think back to the last time when I was in crisis, when I was really angry, if someone came to me and said, calm down at that point, that's not a very useful thing to do because this is not a time when you're particularly rational. And that adrenaline can stay in your system anywhere between 45 minutes to 4 hours. And that is a long, long time. Because what generally happens is you have your crisis phase, and so I've got to the garage, I've filled up, I'm on my way to my next first appointment, and then and I'm starting to find my calm. I'm starting to go into that recovery phase. And then someone might ring me and say, have you done that job I asked you to do? And actually, normally that wouldn't be a trigger at all. But because I'm already stressed and I've already got adrenaline in my system, I go straight back into crisis, and I might be rude, or I might be less than kind, or I might just put the phone back down. I don't put the phone down a lot. I don't know why I've said that. Because actually planning for being aware during crisis and getting through crisis is really important. Safely is really important as a family, but planning for recovery is equally as important, because sometimes what happens is our young people are starting to find their calm, they're starting to wind down, and then somebody says, are you going to say sorry for what they did? And they go back into crisis. And that's really, really, really difficult, because that's when people sometimes describe their children or their pupils in school as repeatedly being in crisis, being in crisis for hours and hours and hours. But what's generally happened is they're being re-triggered. And at this point, it's really important to think about, how do I remove triggers? How do I remove how do I take away the thing that sent us into crisis in the first place? So if that's breaking a toy, how do I move those pieces? If that's being told no, how do I say yes to something else? If it's an emotional trigger, like somebody remembering a difficult situation in the past, how do I move them on to think about something nice? Can I get some nice photographs of that kind of thing? So that takes a little while, anywhere between 45 minutes and 4 hours. Plan for it. Think about what, as a family, what you can do for that. And then what happens is we get something called the post-crisis depression phase, or the blue phase. Now, think back to last time you had a really tricky day. I'll tell you a secret. I drove into some bollards at work the other week, and I wrote off my car. And I went into crisis. I felt really fearful. I had that adrenaline peak. And then I got out, rang the police, did all the things that I needed to do. And then afterwards, when I got home a little bit later, I felt really sad. I mean, yeah, because I wrote my car off, of course. But I felt like I wasn't very clever. I felt like like I was really like I was a bad person. And as a typical adult, and as an adult that knows about these things, I could say that I could tell my husband that. I could say, oh, I feel really rubbish, I feel dead after I've done that. But for our young people, sometimes this is the time where our young people might say really scary things. Like they might say that they want to hurt themselves, or they don't wish to be with us anymore, because actually they feel so rubbish. And this is about kind of our adrenaline response leaves our bodies really tired. It leaves them really depleted. And the hormone that counteracts them is called noradrenaline, and it makes you quite sluggish and quite depressed and quite teary and weepy, because it wants your body to physically recover. I think sometimes people call it the assault cycle. Sometimes people call it arousal curves, or emotion curves. They get called lots of different things. But I think that's a really important thing to understand, and it helps you plan your different interventions, because there are only a limited range of things that we can do when it goes wrong. Because have you ever been really angry? Have you ever been really angry? If someone told you to stop it, could you stop? Really angry, stop it. That doesn't work, does it? What happens if I try calm down? Really angry, really angry, really angry, calm down. That doesn't work either, does it? So there's only a certain amount of things that work. And I've put a list of them there, and unfortunately, we don't have the time to talk through them in any great detail. But maybe we could do a session on reactive strategies in the future. So, the top kind of couple of things is change something. So if little ones are not little ones are nosy, little ones are easy distractible a lot of the time. On my phone, I carry around, I've got an app on that which is 75 different Trump sounds. I don't mean President Trump, I mean bottom burps. Because children think that, kind of children are easily distracted by humour at times. That it can be really easy to distract them with something and divert them and move them on to something new. So if they're really, really upset that their favourite, they're really, really upset because then you've said no to the trampoline, distracting them and diverting them and so doing something really silly, having it playing a Trump noise or pretending to take a phone call or smelling cheesy feet and then running their bath or getting the cookie making kit out, because actually they're really, really upset they can't go on the trampoline. They're not really, really upset that they can't make cookies. So getting the cookies out isn't going to reward or reinforce behaviour, because it's just diverting them.
I was just about to say that one of the things that we'll face, in our team is that, if we've got a young person who has had that real crisis phase, well, actually the first thing we do is we want to cut the demand out. So we want to reduce being asked of them. And then we want to give them something that's really motivating, something that they really like doing. And often we'll get that's a reward, or they're being rewarded, but actually we're not. We're diverting them, we're changing it, we're giving them something that they like. Because actually, if I've had a really bad day and I behave quite poorly and I'm banging the doors, and my husband probably goes and causes a gin.
Absolutely.
It's not rewarding us, it's just giving us a bit of a change.
He's diverting you to a naturally soothing activity.
Yes, that gin and tonic's really important.
Absolutely. So interrupt, distract, divert. Thinking about your calming techniques, your verbal and your non-verbal communication. Children and adults are less able to listen during crisis phase. Think about minimising it. Don't talk about threats or punishments or what they can't do now. If you want to talk about those things, talk about them later, but not now, because it won't help somebody calm down. Actively listen to them, be non-directive, and try and reflect. I could talk about active listening for hours. I think it's a really exciting and underused skill, but it's basically intensive. It's basically not agreeing with someone. What's the best? Validating how somebody feels, making them feel okay for feeling a certain way. Think about your own body language, your own self-awareness, and make sure about your proximity. If you know that somebody might be physically aggressive during their incident, think about where you're best to stand. Are you best to go closer because they would benefit for a hug, or are you best to stay a little bit further away because actually being close to them can be tricky for them? And the last thing that I've kind of got to say, because I'm going to hand over to Dionne for the last slide now, is consider giving in. Now, that's really controversial, but if your little one is going into crisis because they want a biscuit before tea, and I'm not talking about a big crisis this time, but if your little one's going into crisis because they want a biscuit before tea, have a bit of a think about it before you say no, because actually it might be okay to give in. And then next time, you might have a little bit more of a plan. You might think, actually, I don't want them to have a biscuit before tea, so I'm going to move tea 20 minutes earlier. Or I'm going to introduce a piece of visual structure that says first tea, then biscuit. Or I'm going to make a bit of a reward chart so they've got to earn tokens to get a biscuit. So sometimes, because I speak to lots of parents, and sometimes parents will say, well, people like you tell me never to give in, and that's really hard. And actually, I'm not going to say that today. I'm still going to say sometimes it's okay to give in. There's a really fancy name for it as well. It's called strategic capitulation in the behaviour world. But it's okay to give in as long as you've got a plan for next time. So those are some ideas about what to do when it all goes wrong.
And you know what is? Sometimes it will go wrong. It does go wrong sometimes. And I think I want to bring you back to that first thing that Steph said, which was PBS is about kindness. And that's about being kind to ourselves as well. So it's non-judgmental. It's not about blame. Nobody's looking at what you're doing. It's thinking about how you can work together with your child at the centre of it. It's about improving the confidence and skills of not only our young people, but the people who are working, who are caring, so teachers, support staff, parents, about proving that your confidence and skills. It's about your child learning new coping strategies and new skills so that they can go on and be successful, that they can have more opportunities to make life better and be out doing more things and reducing identified behaviours. It's hard, and some things will work really, really well, and some things will work not so well. But you're on a journey learning about this. So when it doesn't go well, don't worry about it, because actually the next time it's going to go better. So really, that's my last word about, be kind to yourself throughout this. It won't always be a success, but it won't always be a failure either. And as you go through the journey, you're going to learn and understand a lot more.
Absolutely. No one's ever gets it right first time, do you? It's all about that horrible phrase of trial and error.
And we make mistakes and we learn as we go along.
We absolutely do. Just before we start and look at the questions box, I'm just going to show you at the end of the there's just a few resources that Dionne and I put together. I can't emphasize how useful the Challenging Behaviour Foundation's information sheets are. Dionne's put a guide there specifically skills teaching, sorry, but I've popped on the general link because there's information on things like there's information about how to write positive behaviour support plan. There's information about different types of behaviour, and there's also, I've popped up the link there, the British Institute's Learn Disability PBS video. It's a 6-minute video that tells you a little bit about PBS, and I spend a lot of time showing that to schools and to new parents, just to kind of give them a bit of a general introduction in a much more articulate way than I can. So I'm going to go back to the question slide now, and I'm going to bring the questions box up. Now let me see. Ooh, here comes the questions box. Now, why can't I see? Oh, right. So I've just got a little comment from Glenn at the moment. Is it Glenn? Just saying thank you very much. So that's always very lovely to get a thank you. Now, I can't see any more questions in the box, which is, for a Friday afternoon, I can absolutely understand that. Do you know what? I've been sitting doing this cross-legged for some unknown reason, and so I am so excited to move at the end of this. However, I am basically just padding time out at the moment, as you can understand, because I'm just making sure that we've got no other questions coming up. I also know that this webinar popped on YouTube, and you'll also be getting the survey at the end of the you'll get a survey via email, and feel free to pop any questions on there, and I'm sure they'll make their way to Dionne and I, and we can think about how we respond to them too. So Helen, I don't think we've got any more questions that I can't see, have we?
I can't see that any more questions are coming in as we speak.
Gorgeous. Oh,
just one.
Nicola, you've just popped in. So Nicola, you've said that, now let me just expand that. My 6-year-old claps in my face when angry. How do I explain this is rude and redirect his behaviour? That's a great question, isn't it? Because rude's a really interesting concept, and it's kind of what we're thinking is that's a really difficult thing for other people and for us to deal with, and how do we explain that to a 6-year-old? And I don't know kind of whether your little one has any other things going on for the Nicola, because rude's a really complex concept, and maybe we can't teach your little one that it's rude, but maybe we should be teaching them to do an alternative, that functional equivalence that Dionne was talking about earlier. Because if that clappings, because you've just popped in, and that's really useful for me, you've just popped in, if I try this at the time she growls at me and gets angry, she has autism. So just like Dionne was saying, is that it's probably about thinking about what would you like her to do and how can you practice it in that green phase? How can we practice it and pair it? I can't think of the better word to use because I think it's Friday and I'm losing all my words. But you couple it or you make it associated with something fun. So kind of, should we practice what we do when we're feeling tricky? If that's not clapping in our faces, should we clap down low? What is it that's important about that clapping for her? I don't know what you think about that, Dionne.
I think it is. I think it's thinking about what I think Steph's really right. That road is a really difficult concept for young people to learn. So it is thinking about, is there a different thing, a different way? So thinking about what you might do and thinking about it in that green phase. So thinking about a functional equivalent behaviour. So is it that she claps her thighs? Is it that? And then you make that into something fun when she's feeling like it. And you know, it might take a while for that to work. So just because she doesn't do it first time doesn't mean to say that you won't get there with it either.
Nicola's just popped in to say that she thinks it's going to get a bigger reaction from her, and I think that's not a bad thing to think about, Nicola. That kind of, I've had a couple of experiences through my career of young people trying to help me understand how they feel by doing something that they think will be tricky for me, and I wonder whether this is how she's saying I am very angry, and I don't know that because obviously I don't live in your house. Try those things about thinking about it, the green phase, but also try maybe some active listening about her, or kind of some telling her that you know that she's angry, and this is what we could do about being angry. And that's really hard when someone's got a communication impairment, but it can be very, very useful as well. But I would try those two things. Think about it, the green, think about a response, something you want to teach in the green phase to communicate angry, and then think about labeling her angry, or almost kind of being with her when she's angry, when she's doing it as well.
I would also think about doing some ABC charts, and really looking at those antecedents, because I suppose clapping in somebody's face is a very good way of getting attention, and maybe thinking about what's happening beforehand might be really helpful to try and think why we're getting that.
So I hope that answers those questions, Nicola. It sounds like the other thing is, have a little bit of think about it. Have a little bit of a think about the things that Dionne said, but have yourself a pop on the Challenging Behaviour Foundation website as well, and have a look at those resources in there, because they might be helpful too. I hope they are. But anyway, those are some of my they were really well put questions, Nicola. Thank you. So I think that's kind of us finished for today. Let me move on my slides, because I know that I have to do it a certain way for Helen. So additional resources, and that's a thank you. The questionnaire will launch at the end of the webinar, so you'll get that automatically to the email account that you signed up for. And that's it for today. Thank you so much.